The European Commission has formally approved an agreement between Beijing and Brussels that officially ends a dispute over the import of Chinese solar panels. The import tax on Chinese solar makers were due to kick in next week and would have been as high as 68%. Jack Barton reports from Brussels.
Having read through the fine print, few people doubt that the solar panel agreement that has now been officially adopted represents a victory for Beijing, as well as countries like Germany and Britain, which had lobbied hard against the tariffs, though they did not deny that dumping or selling panels below production value due to subsidies had been taking place. At a minimum price guarantee of 56 euro cents a watt, Chinese panels will still dramatically undercut European manufacturers. But the manufacturers only make up a small portion of the overall solar industry, which has boomed on the back of the cheap panels, especially in Germany, which is attempting to phase out nuclear energy and is rushing headlong into renewables. And to a significant degree, Germany's economy has also been staying afloat thanks to exports to China, something Berlin does not want to jeopardize. It's not all bad news for European manufacturers. Chinese solar panel imports will now be capped at 7 gigawatts, which should bring China's EU market share from about 80% down to 60%. For its part, Beijing is expected to soon drop anti-subsidy investigations into European wine and polysilicon, which were seen as retaliatory measures. The events of the past few weeks have now cast a shadow over the Commission's next proposed investigation into Chinese telecommunications giants Huawei and ZTE Corp, which, given the lack of support on solar panels by member states, is now expected to proceed with greater caution.
Jack mentioned there's going to be a price floor for the Chinese solar exports. Ning Hong visited one of the solar panel companies affected by this deal and asked them what they thought of the deal.
This is not the best solution, but it is the only one they've got so far. Yingli Solar in Baoding of Hebei Province is not the largest solar panel producer in China. Even so, its exports to the EU market make up more than 60% of the company's annual sales last year. After the details of the agreement were released, China's leading solar panel producer, Trina Solar, issued a statement on its website referring to the agreement as not perfect, but the result of cooperation. It is still unclear how China's PV enterprises will split the quota. In July, the State Council came out with a statement on promoting the PV industry. It plans to quadruple total PV installed capability in China to 35 million kilowatt-hour by 2015. The intention to boost the PV market in China is quite clear.
The statement encourages us to work harder on distributed power generation and ground power stations. It also clarifies the policies in finance and taxation, grid access, synchronization, and market operations.
Like many solar panel producers, they're happy to see an agreement based on cooperation has been reached. However, the outcome may lead to another round of restructuring in China's PV sector. Hundreds of thousands of jobs may be involved. Ning Hong, CCTV, Hebei Province.
Joining me now, Ralph Winnie, Director of the Eurasian Business Coalition China Program, Eurasia Center, here in the studio. Welcome back, Ralph.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
This solar, so the commission has met, they've talked about it. It looks like they've basically approved it. I don't know if there's going to be more that needs to be done in terms of the approval process, but it sounds like we're close to the end here.
Right.
But let's start with the point of whether or not this is a win-win, or it's really, to me, it seems like more of a win-win-win for China. What's your view?
Well, I think right now, certainly China has benefited. I mean, anti-dumping duties of 47.6% were set to go into effect on August 6th. But now this agreement has averted that from happening for any Chinese exporters that voluntarily participate in this program. But already you do have a lawsuit that's being filed by Milan Nich of Eco Pro Sun, who is claiming that the agreement violates the strict legal requirements of the EU.
I mean, to some extent, okay, China makes these solar panels.
Right.
Yes, they make it for cheaper than the European manufacturers. Right. They want to sell it in Europe. Either ban them altogether, or if we're talking about free trade, so they come in, they sell the solar panels, the European makers can't make it for as cheap, but that's not China's fault. What's the core issue of the argument here?
Well, I think you've got the companies in the EU that want to protect the solar industry, and they're very worried about Chinese companies coming in and undercutting them. And now they have come to this agreement, but it still remains to be seen if it's going to be upheld. I think it is going to be upheld, but already you have a lawsuit, and they're going to have to deal with that. But I think overall, it's a good first step. I mean, it's averted what would have been a trade war.
Well, I see one silver lining
Yeah.
for the manufacturers in Europe, and that's this cap of the 6.5 to 7 gigawatts of,
Right.
of solar panels.
Right.
So they currently sell about between 7 and 10. So let's say we take the 10 number, they
Right.
sell 7. That means China sells all their stuff at the 7, and the rest, whatever they sell extra, the European makers can then compete kind of on their own.
Right.
Isn't that good for Europe? I mean, it's better than having no agreement at all.
Yeah, I think certainly it's very good for Europe. But if you are looking at it from a strictly legal perspective, which is what this eco pro sun argument is, then this is still it's still dumping, because even if you haven't agreed upon price, if you still haven't dealt with the actual injury, then it's not going to go.
I mean, it's just amazing in this
Right.
day of sort of free trade, and we talk
Yeah.
about capitalism and all the
Right.
great things about it,
Right.
that we're talking about setting minimum prices for things, because that's the opposite of free trade and capitalism, is setting fixed prices.
Well,
It's just ironic. This retaliatory measure by China, when
Right.
this case first got initialized,
Right.
China then said, wait a minute, what about your wine exports?
Yeah.
What about this? What about that? Now, is all that going to be
Well,
dropped now? They're going to shake hands, and they're going to be okay with everything.
For right now, the Chinese are going to drop that lawsuit, and I think that's a good thing. But it's going to remain to be seen if you're going to have other companies in the EU start filing lawsuits claiming that this agreed upon price is a violation of the strict legal requirements under the EU. And what Milan Nish is saying is that this agreed upon price is, and I quote, exactly at the level of the current dumping price for Chinese modules, end quote, which means under the EU guidelines, then the injury has not been alleviated.
What price would the EU ideally wanted that to be at, and if not 56 euro cents?
I don't think they've, the lawsuit, I don't think, has really come up with a price. What they talk about is protecting the photovoltaic industry in the EU. That seems to be their main issue.
Now,
but they certainly are looking at creating a price that is going to protect the EU industry, but at the same time, they don't want the Chinese to be able to come in and to take advantage, especially under these dumping duties.
so this is a deal done with Europe.
Right.
Obviously, China sells solar panels all over the world.
Right.
Might there be a similar deal in the U.S. or South America or any other parts of the world they do business in, or is this just going to be for Europe and we're going to not talk about it again, or are they going to consider talking about the other parts of the world as well?
I think they will have to look at the other parts of the world. I mean, solar certainly is growing in many countries, and it's going to be important that the issue gets addressed right off the bat, so you don't have the potential of a trade war. I mean, globalization is a great thing, but you have to make sure that everyone is on the same page, and you got to make sure that businesses can work in a transparent environment.
Pretend for a moment I know nothing about solar panels. I know nothing about this entire deal, which
Okay.
actually isn't too far from the truth. But
Right.
why would somebody who's watching our show,
Right.
and you say, okay, why do I care about Europe and solar panels and China? It obviously is symbolic of something greater. Help us explain what that is.
Well, it comes down to the issue of being free and fair trade, being able to market and sell your products in a particular environment. And certain areas like the EU, certain economic trade zones, you want to be able to get your products into that market. But there are also domestic constituencies that are very afraid of what's going to happen once these foreign products get into their markets. And that's what you're seeing with the solar panels. There's this strong emphasis in Europe to protect the solar industry. So even though they have this deal, you have groups like EcoProSun that are filing a lawsuit because they want to protect the photovoltaic industry. And they are saying that this agreement violates the strict EU legal requirements. Now, only a court is going to be able to determine if that's the case or not. So we need to follow that and see where that leads.
All right. For the record, I'm a big fan of green energy. Ralph Winnie, thank you very much for joining us. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.